Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Mastering Runeterra Squadcast. I'm MonteXristo, and tonight I'm joined by my pals CardGamer, Santa, Phansora, Shadawx, and you guys might notice a new face on the desk. We got Eniamor with us, a fellow wobbly wombat, and the G from New Zealand. Eni, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Hold on.
Oh, they're playing!
Too much. Dude, I need it for my headphones.
Mike!
No. Yo, okay. Sup, gamers? It was too much spinning. I was so much, yeah.
Oh my god. Yo, what's up, everybody? Thank you guys all so much for tuning in to today's show. We were talking before the stream, before the recording here, and honestly, not a whole lot has gone on. But today there was an AMA by Davetron, and one very important question was addressed: rotation. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on rotation? We've kind of touched on this briefly in the past, but we've not gotten too far into it. Today we have a couple more answers. Shadawx, I know you took a peek at this. Do you want to start us off with your opinions on rotation? I know you and I have discussed this privately before as well, so I'm sure you have something to say about this.
Yeah. So I think rotation is interesting. If you haven't seen my video, take a look at it. But yeah, today in the AMA they said that part of the rotation will include champions and their packages, as well. Instead of a whole set being rotated out like Hearthstone does, or I think Magic does too, right? That's how their rotation works as well.
Yeah,
is just the newest X sets is only legal, and they did say that would be a separate game. There will be a separate game mode where everything's legal. So Wild from Hearthstone if you play Hearthstone. But yeah, I think rotation's cool. It's needed.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Oh,
what's kind of interesting.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Compared to Hearthstone and Magic, Runeterra cannot do set rotation.
Mm-hmm.
It would fundamentally just break half the regions in the game just because of how the release schedule was.
Well, we currently can't do set rotation, right? It's something we can get to in the future, but with how they release the game, right? By giving us essentially an incomplete game.
And then Shurima, the expansion, Mount Targon, the expansion. You would just be crossing off regions.
Yeah.
So,
and
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, for those who don't know what rotation is basically they'll take an amount of cards or certain cards, and you just won't be able to use them in that format anymore. So think of it I'd say think of this one more as a ban list rather than rotation.
So what I was going to ask is you mentioned that you think rotation is necessary. Why? Why is rotation necessary? Because I have personally always been of the opinion that a digital card game, one that does balance patches like Runeterra, doesn't exactly require rotation to be functional. We can do a ban list. We can just balance the cards so that way they're not playable in the current meta if they're too problematic. There's other ways to get around rotation, and I personally feel that it's just unnecessary.
Yeah. So rotation and ban lists are essentially it's the same thing, just a different kind of form, right?
Yeah. And I think the form matters a lot too, right? I think
sort of
saying that in a competitive format you can't play these champions is okay, right? I think if that changes season to season, I think that's exciting. I think that keeps things new and fresh and amazing. But I also think that nerfing champions is okay here and there to take them out. But I do think that was more of a solution in the earlier stages of the game we've had right now. I know a lot of people really love Fiora. Fiora's currently unplayable. I know a lot of people really love Draven. Draven is playable right now, but he's not great. So I'm leaning more away from going towards this ban champion so they're unplayable, because a big thing about Runeterra is that people love playing their champions. People love having access to their champions, and nerfing them to the point where they're unplayable, even in a normal format, even in an extended format, is a bad call from my perspective at this point. But having a ban list saying in ranked mode you can't play these because they're elo banned for this season. We don't want these champions around for this season. I think that's okay. I know a lot of people have various opinions on ban lists. I know a lot of people from Yu-Gi-Oh! Are very against them because Yu-Gi-Oh! Does things differently. I'm not a Yu-Gi-Oh player myself, but I know some of you have dabbled into that field. Does anybody have more to kind of touch on? Any counterpoints to me there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we all do. I'll probably go last because I'm the guest, but you guys go first, and I'll join.
No,
Nah,
you
Eddie,
go
it's all you.
first.
You spoke up. You better talk now.
It's too late.
Okay. So I would like agree with you, Monty, that you could just like balance everything. But the thing with like card games is they evolve in a way where like card design philosophies change. And a great like example of that is like weapon masters, right? And equipments. And those ideas kind of power creep so many others that it makes deck creativity like really restricted. And because of that, you can't like have other things from like rising tides compete. Because it falls off a lot of the time where you have something so restricted later on, it just kind of jumps the gun and it's kind of just a lot better than that other stuff. That's the main reason. It's like card design philosophy and then changes of that.
Yeah, I also want to say, like, you could make an argument that there's not enough cards in the game right now to warrant a set rotation, but I wouldn't expect this set rotation to happen until at least midway through next year. Like, we're going to have like 3 or 4 more expansions before set rotation's even on the table. And that's a lot of cards. Like, that is more than enough cards to warrant taking some out. Even if it's not wholly necessary, it's also a lot easier on the devs than trying to balance like thousands of cards. And it also opens up a lot of like creative space, which is one of the things I'm most excited about. Like, the reason I like set rotation so much is you can rotate out these cards that have been dominant for so long and print things that fill a similar role in like a unique way without it feeling redundant. And in doing so, you can kind of lower the power level of those mechanics. So like
Rally.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you have these 2 cards that are just like 4 mana rally. But then you have these really interesting cards like Playful Trickster. And if you take out those 2 rally cards, suddenly Playful Trickster and things like it can open up more design space. It can lower the power level of that a bit. So that way now Demacia can have like more exciting cards, more exciting champions, instead of like honestly, like 80% of their power budget is rally because it's one of the most powerful mechanics in the game. Counter spells is another area where like if you like, there's so many interesting counter spells, like the I forget what the name of the 3 mana spell, Memory's Cloak, like things like that aren't just deny. You know, like if you, not that I'm saying you necessarily should cycle out deny, but if you were to, then it can really open up that space, and that's what I'm really, really excited about.
Yeah, there's stuff like that where like the presence of certain like rallies in Demacia, they eat up so much of the power budget of Demacia that you can't print other cards that are also very strong because in combination it's too much. And I'd like to address what Monty said about Fiora and Draven, because I feel like that's actually an argument for rotation in a sense. If you think about like paper Magic, right? Obviously it's paper versus digital, but there's some sense that like if I have a card, like if I have my Black Lotus, or that's not a card I get nerfed. I have some really powerful card that ends up getting nerfed, right? I couldn't continue to play that if it was digital and they just nerfed it. But I can play it at home, like kitchen top Magic. And so some sense of like if you had Fiora and Draven, you could ban or rotate. I think rotate's probably better for a lot of the reasons Santa said. You could rotate out such cards, and people who really enjoy those champions could play them in a like broader format than the like main standard format.
So counterpoint to that, we're discussing how part of the reason why we rotate is to create new average levels of power, right? Like a new baseline of power level. That's a point that kind of all of you have loosely touched on at this point. Doesn't that end up creating more work for the devs, having to balance both eternal formats and like make sure that these champions can keep up with the new stuff in the eternal format, as well as balancing the modern format or the current format, the ranked format, whatever you want to call it? Like, isn't that more work at the end of the day?
Yes, but And like a game like Hearthstone, for instance, just like pretends the wild, the like all cards format, just basically pretends it doesn't exist.
That's
So, like,
they actually balance for wild sometimes, like especially
Sometimes.
recently they've been balancing for wild a lot more, and I know
Recently-
that like it's been a struggle for them because they'll
Yeah.
rotate something to wild and then it'll be too weak or it'll be way too strong for wild format, and they'll have to like come back and adjust it again. So I'm not sure that this eternal temporary format is like a proper answer. I'm not sure it's not an answer. To be fair, I'm not a game designer. I'm not a game developer. Like, I don't know. I'm just musing aloud about my own personal opinions on these things, obviously.
I would imagine it's cleaner than trying to like nerf large swaths of cards to try to like try to do the level of rotation, but with nerfs. Like if you think of something like Aphelios weapons went 2 to 3 to 2. I imagine doing that at scale to try to like effectively rotate a bunch of cards would be really hard to keep track of.
I also think we'll just keep calling it wild format, but just an unlimited format, I guess. Once you when you kind of just like throw thousands of cards at a player base, it has a tendency to kind of balance around itself because there's so many cards and so many counters to other cards and things like that, where like the meta that develops will always have answers. There's in the niche situations where there is something that's just overtly dominant or something that's like overtly weak, it's a lot easier to go in and fix that specific scenario than to try and anticipate what people are going to do with thousands of cards. Yeah.
I do agree with that. I'll use a reference in Hearthstone. Like, there was a point where Wild was actually slower than Standard, which we're kind of getting off the point of Runeterra, but it's a good reference point. And basically, like Hearthstone Standard, which is the rotation, they were just so much faster than Wild, just because of like how they had restricted card space, and it just got to a point where it was combo. And like Santa was saying, when you have a wider pool, it does just slowly balance out. And there's another good point is when you have a wider pool for like Runeterra, it's also a lot more applicable, and that becomes a format people will mostly play because this is a very free to play game. So having two formats is pretty good.
So counterpoint, let's continue talking about Hearthstone because this is the closest comparison that we have. Wild Hearthstone currently has a ban list. It's only 3 cards deep, but they do have a ban list from their Eternal format. So to me, that tells me that this Eternal format does not balance itself. One, maybe it's extreme outliers, right? But there's always going to be some broken combo in there.
They are extreme outliers.
Yeah, that is an extreme.
Ironically,
outlier.
two of the cards are Warlock cards, which is funny.
2 of them are for the same archetype.
Here's the thing, though, right? I think when a format like Wild has existed for so long in a game like Hearthstone, which throughout time has had so many problematic cards and powerful combos and synergies, there's only 3 bans. I think really actually goes to show that. And I think when you do start to have these rotations, especially because one thing we were talking about is redundancy, you can start playing such all in and degenerate decks that are just so extremely all in on one thing that if there is a very powerful thing, you can just make the most disgusting board based rally deck Runeterra has ever seen. And you will lose to anything that has a reasonable game plan against that, but anything that can't deal with it, you'll run over. And I think a good example of this is as the game goes out more, we're gonna just keep getting more good 1-drops, right? And if we rotate something like Darius package and Decimate out, we're gonna get another aggro finisher. So if combo is really prevalent, or these really problematic mid-range decks like Kaisa is really prevalent in a Wild format, you'll probably be able to just build this monstrosity of 18 of the best 1-drops and then 6 insane burn finishers and just be okay, good try, mid-range combo deck that plays 1 unit a turn, die. There's a lot of ways it can start to balance itself where these other formats can't have due to the redundancy that can create power issues and all of this. And because it's a less serious format, you also can have things be a little bit more powerful, and you can have stuff exist in ways it probably shouldn't exist in a rotating format.
That also sounds like a lot of fun and something that could never exist in a single format game. Like, just like having that is really exciting.
Something also about rotation is like, if we think about like trying to like nerf stuff and keeping one format, but we just nerf stuff to balance everything, there's a lot of cards that like flip from playable to unplayable, like on a knife's edge if you change any one thing about the card. And I feel like having that be your way of effectively rotating out cards to like really shake things up is a bit much.
So Ptash, who our viewers might recognize from our episode 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point, is mentioning in the chat that cards like Force of Will help keep the Legacy MTG format under control, and that Riot can directly print to the Legacy format, to the Eternal format, to the Wild format, whatever we want to call it, to help keep it in balance. Now, we've seen Riot directly print cards outside of expansions in order to balance things. It happened a while ago, but it is something that they're obviously open to. It was something that they were testing, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen again. How would you guys feel about cards being printed directly to an Eternal format?
That's great.
It's good.
Yeah, go for it.
I think another thing
Yeah.
is like, it's just really hard to say because we're just speculating so much. Like, we
course.
don't know exactly how Riot wants to do a rotation. Like, rotation also like becomes very interesting and very different, like depending on how you do it. Because like Magic rotation ends up playing out so differently than like Hearthstone rotation because like depending on who you ask and like what community of Magic players you go to, you know, they will tell you like these rotated out formats are like the better formats or like the more important, the more prestigious, you know, the ones that like the true Magic players play as opposed to like standard, which is like their like in session stuff, right? Their like rotation is standard in Magic, and like stuff like Modesty or like Legacy, Vintage is like the older stuff, and like some of that is viewed as like super prestigious. And I think just depending on like how much Riot wants to validate the format will really like play into that. And I think if they do want to validate it, it can lead to really interesting implications for seasonals and worlds of just like this seasonal is going to be like on this format, this other seasonal is going to be on this format, or like maybe we get 2 world champions, right? One for each format.
Okay.
It just really depends what Riot wants to do with it. But until then, it's just like a lot of speculation. And I think it's a bit silly to get really upset on something that is happening and like we don't know that much about right now.
Totally agree with you there, CardGamer. So from today's AMA, we are going to support the non-rotated format as a fully fledged format, so you'll still have a place to battle with your favorites, and that will always include the Path of Champions. We're still working out the details of that support. So obviously Riot is open to various degrees of support, custom balancing for an Eternal format, custom card printing for an Eternal format, could be anything. As you said, we're speculating a lot here, but that's kind of the name of the game. Where I was going with that, though, is that they have in the past said that they're open to having seasonals be different formats. We did have the Singleton as an official format. By the way, what happened to Singleton?
Where'd it go?
We can't play it.
Gauntlet.
You can build a Singleton deck. You cannot play it in friendlies. It does not show up in your client. I've brought this up to devs before. It feels bad, man. I really want to play 3 region Singleton. Please give it to me. I've asked. Please, I really like
Just play
Singleton
Runeterra
format.
champs.
But back to what I was talking about before I went on my little Singleton tangent. I think it would be really cool to have seasonals be different formats. Like maybe 1 in every 3 seasonals is an Eternal format seasonal. Maybe we have 2 world championships. I don't know. Like it spices things up. It changes things a little bit, but variety is never a bad thing in my opinion.
I do think that like rotation lines up very nicely with their like was it a few months ago stated goal of measuring the success by how much it shakes things up. And I think like rotation be like a very good tool for achieving that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Also, this is like years down the line. But the other fun thing with rotation is we can like, let's say we cycle out Darius, release a new card called Darius, Might of Noxus. And it's just a brand new card, but it's also Darius. And so you can do some fun stuff with that.
I do like the idea of reprinting old champions in new ways and like take a new take on their kit.
But like that's legit like 3 years minimum down the road.
It is.
What if that card was just like Sherman Wind? You know, you just hit with Darius and then you Sherman Wind it later. That would be so nuts.
Yeah. I'm just like really excited at the prospect of like having new copies of cards that we aren't really allowed to have like second versions of right now. Like Decimate is like a big one. Like I'm really excited to see like what is like the next crazy aggro finisher, because like I don't think you're really allowed to print one right now with Decimate how it currently is. Like Decimate's a really good card.
Well, we have like Decimate and Riptide Sermon right now, and that's like currently a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Or you mean Slippery Wave Rider?
I have heard whispers. I have heard whispers that both Decimate and Riptide Sermon are getting nerfed.
Wow.
How would you guys
I
feel about a
hope.
Decimate nerf?
Decimate nerf surprises me.
Because I don't.
Sermon nerf.
I'm against
Should.
that. Like I'm vehemently against a Decimate nerf. I think that's trolling, and like I think if that goes through, I'm like not here for that.
Like, I'm not an aggro player, and I'm not a big fan of the archetype, but like I feel like it's just gone
yeah.
though, right? Well, where is it without Decimate?
That's what I was
It's
about
like-
to say. Like,
It's already on its last legs with the current build of Pirates that's like debatably not aggro.
Yeah,
And like they're just removing it? That's
Noxus is
Interesting.
like hardly a region. Let's be real.
I think
Noxus is
that's
not
true.
a real region right now. It's definitely
Revert
on like the
Raven
bottom
Bloom.
of the power levels of regions.
Revert
Outside of
Raven
Pirates, which is like heavily reliant on the Bilgewater side and like heavily reliant on Hookmaster and like these very, very powerful recently printed cards to do well, there's not really a single Noxus deck in the format. Shadow Isles Gwen, like Gwen Noxus is not really a Noxus deck. It plays Flock for tempo. And Noxus is not really truly a tempo region. It's got 2 tempo decks at the moment, but at the end of the day, that's not its region identity. It's just kind of conveniently in there because those are the only remaining powerful cards in its region.
Well,
it's just like Flock decks
I
got gutted, right? We had like Tribeam, and like even further back we had like Swain. And then they kind of came back with Ravenbloom, and now they're like gone again.
I think that's because Raven Bloom got like unjustifiably nerfed. Like they shouldn't have got
I think it
nerfed
was
at all.
justifiable. I think if they
Really?
didn't
I-
nerf
I-
Raven
it's-
Bloom, it
it's
would have been at the peak of the
unplayable.
meta.
it's
I
so
disagree.
bad though now.
We at least have
Yeah.
we at least have a point in between 10 and 12. It's called 11.
Sounds like CardGamer's got some thoughts he wants to
yeah.
share.
So, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily agree with the fact that like Noxus isn't a tempo region. I think like Beta Noxus wasn't a tempo region, but I think ever since Swain has been in the game, like Noxus has definitely leaned into like being a tempo region, and this has like been even further demonstrated with things like Reputation and especially Scion. And I think Noxus like does play to that really well. It just depends on how you build it. Obviously, like the Decimate side is not tempo focused, and I think that a Decimate nerf is. I don't think I like it, but if you just do a 6-mana Decimate, I think it can be okay. I think if you take away damage, the card is dead.
Mhm.
6-mana Decimate can just make mana points a bit harder and can just make aggro like that 1 turn slower, give you that 1 more action, which I think can be fair. It doesn't, at the end of the day, do too much because a lot of the times in the later game, aggro does have that mana. It's just when they're really getting in like that every bit of mana to kill you right before you get that last attack or whatever. But I think a Sermon nerf is like really justified. I think we all saw that one coming.
Yeah, Sermon's insane.
I think we're all on
Like-
the same page there, yeah.
I think it's
I don't-
kind of funny you mentioned Tempo Noxus because like we have was it Gwen Sejuani is like the current popular Overwhelm deck, and like that's kind of Noxus's identity in the tempo side of things, and just kind of got squeezed out in favor of the other 2 regions.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think like Noxus tempo is very strong right now, but I think that comes down to like an issue that Noxus has had for a long time outside of Scion. And I think Scion right now is just really hurting on the fact that like 1, it's an Ionia meta, and 2, Draven and Baboon and Lost Soul and I think 1 other card, Scion himself, right? Or like all just weaker
Rummage.
than
Rummage, is that
Rummage
too?
has been 2 mana for a while. But like all of these cards are just weaker than when Scion originally came out. Like the deck is still really respectable, right? But like it's taken a lot of hits over the year.
Bring back my card draw. bring back my rummage.
Card draw should be allowed to be good. Everything
Wait,
should be on the
is
same
good in
power
this
level.
game.
It's not. I
do not think
We
card
have
draw
Glimpse.
is that
Eh,
bad.
have
Any-
Nakakaboros is the only good card draw card in the game.
Yes,
They
Glimpse
nerfed pick a
beyond?
card. They
Glimpse?
nerfed rummage. Glimpse is
Yeah.
bad. Glimpse is not bad,
Glimpse
but
is
it's
not
Glimpse
bad.
is not
Glim-
bad.
Glimpse
Okay,
is so
Glimpse.
bad.
No.
Okay. Glimpse is a very good card, and Spirit Leash is like pretty good at it too. But like, here is the thing about these cards: is like they aren't true card advantage in the sense that like you take a card that you have to kill and get rid of, and you take a card in hand that says like draw cards, and then like those become 2 new cards. Which the way Shadow Isles decks are built, right? You're building to prevent that, and like normally it isn't that much of a cost, but like that isn't good card draw inherently. You can make it good card draw, but like that
There's,
isn't like
but
powerful card draw compared
off,
to like
like, the-
what there is in a lot of other games and what there can be.
off like the top of my head, I think Rummage is still good card draw at 2 mana. I think Deep Med is incredibly powerful.
Yep.
I think Deep Med's really good. I have Nagakaboros is really good. I think at some point, Whispered Words will be ridiculous.
Yep.
Because I think they're going to keep buffing Reputation, and I think at some point that's actually going to be really strong. Aside from that, I think the same thing is true about Trifarian Assessor. I think that card is bonkers and will be bonkers at some point. TF on his own is extremely powerful. I think pick a card is kind of weak comparatively, but there's like a lot of good card draw options in this game.
Yeah, we've got Loaded Vessel.
I don't
Loaded
think
Vessel.
Whispered
So, like,
Words is good.
here's-
Go ahead.
I think Whispered Words will be good.
Here's the issue with card draw in this game is that you have to pay so much for card draw when like you don't have to pay much at all for card generation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that makes card draw 1 a lot worse, and like 2 like it's just not even
Yeah.
that good a lot of the time. Like Rummage is like 2 mana and then you're replacing 2 cards, so then you need like fodder generators or you need like stress defense. Like it gets really questionable. Like Deep Med is like fine, but you have to be in a deck that like can regularly proc flow if you really want to have it enabled, or then you have to plan it out, and it's a super big commitment compared to something like Pathways pre-nerf, right? Like I really think there's only been a handful of good card draw spells in the game, and it's like 1
What would you
mana
say about
Rummage.
Preservarium?
High.
Preservarium
Preservarium is like Preservarium is good value, but it's extremely slow, so it's very like meta dependent on whether it's good or not. It's super low tempo, but it's very high value.
Yeah, it falls into a weird place. Like, I almost don't consider Preservarium as card draw, because when you're playing it, you're playing it to activate something like Shapestone. You're playing it to like turn on your Talia. Not that it's not a decent card, but like CardGamer said, it is very incredibly slow, and a lot of the time you have to rationalize putting in your deck by adding these other cards to like increase the payoff for it. Because putting it on the board on turn 2 is like, you're going to lose that game 9 times out of 10.
Or it's just a placeholder.
You
like
you
it's an extra
sometimes
card.
play it to thin your deck, and like you're not playing it on turn 2 in those decks. You're playing it on like much later.
Yeah, like you
Like,
put it
for
in
sure.
Auction Sivir just as a
You can
like
put it as like a 1 over
40th card.
something.
Yeah.
In a lot of decks.
I will say I really like the comparison between card draw and card generation as a counterpoint, because that is 100% true.
Yeah.
Card generation. What I'm kind of curious about is, do we think card generation is too strong,
No,
or that card draw is too weak?
I think it's the latter. I think card draw is too weak.
Okay.
I think Cycle is not bad in this game. Like, Pale Cascade is pretty good. I think Guiding Touch is kind of
Guiding
mid,
Touch.
but like you don't feel terrible about playing it.
Time Trick's really good.
Time Trick, I
Time
think
Trick's
Time
really
Trick's an
good.
awful
No,
card.
Time Trick is a bad card.
Time Trick is a terrible
For
card.
Cycle?
It's a
Yeah.
terrible card.
Time Trick is a filtering card. Time
Yeah.
Trick is like a card where you say, I can afford to spend 2 mana and I want 37 cards in my deck. There are like 3 decks that can actually play Time Trick, and it does more than just filter.
Yeah, that sounds good.
There's I think like Pal and Gifts is, or whatever, Guiding Touch is like the best cantrips. But what I'm more interested in is like why they're so concerned about printing like draw engines, especially in a game with like interaction. Because like if it's solitaire, if it's actually a solitaire, I see the problem. But if I can interact with a draw engine, then there's like a whole different space, and that adds like more mechanics for PNZ and identity. But I don't know why they don't print good draw engines.
You're right. The only reasonable draw engine, and I don't even know if you can call it an engine, is Trifarian Assessor, which we've kind of touched on already. I know in the past you've been a big fan of the... What's the card called? Is it Veteran Investigator? That's the
Insightful.
Insightful Investigator. It's 4 mana, 3/3 in P&Z. Is it 4 mana? It is 4 mana, right? And when you
4 mana.
when you play a 2 mana card, it draws you a fleeting card. That was a big card in your Catastrophe deck back in the day. I remember you were playing that deck. I remember being quite high on that deck myself and having a good bit of fun with it. That card sucks. Like, that card is really bad. And it's like one of the few draw engines that is sort of semi-playable, but still has such a high deck building restriction that, like, you really need to go out of your way to get it to work. So,
I mean, we also have a card like Brash Gambler.
Brash Gambler's fun.
Yeah, but is it good, though?
No.
The issue with Brash Gambler is it doesn't have enter the battlefield payoff. Like, if Bash Gambler said, like, discard 2, summon, draw 2, and attack, draw 2, like, this is an entirely different card, you know?
Yeah.
It just doesn't do anything on play.
Yeah.
Usually gets killed.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the easiest way to tell if a card... Yeah, the easiest way to tell if a card is, like, good or on the brink of being good is if it does something right away.
Yeah.
If it does something right away, like on summon or on play, or like, I don't know, even like some crazy like last breath or something, then it's like either good or like close to being good.
Mm-hmm.
If it does something like Master Yi, for example, I was talking about it the other day. Like Master Yi, for example, the reason he's not good is because he doesn't do anything right away. He does something good next turn, but it's not even that good, and it's random. But it's because there's no payoff right away.
It's just something good without having to have additional investment.
Yeah.
Whether that investment's like more cards or just more turns to wait.
Or just like having to live. Like, that's an investment in itself, right? Like having to attack.
Mm-hmm.
I also really like that the only like quote unquote draw engine would be Shellfolk. Like the only playable one is card generation.
but, like,
I think that's
Avatar of the
hilarious.
Tides.
Avatar of the Tides is
Avatar
playable.
of the
I will stand by that. I'm
That's
with
card
you.
generation. We're not drawing cards.
I know, it's
Not
generation.
drawing.
Card draw.
Like, we touched on it, and
Well,
I've touched on this
generation.
before in the past, like on my own streams, like without everybody here. Card generation is just so much more powerful in this game, and I'm perfectly okay with that. The problem is that it's unequally distributed across the regions, and like, it's okay to give a portion of the regions these powerful effects when every region can pair with them nicely. So, like, you can always have that option, but some region combinations, like Demacia Freljord, have no draw, very little filtering, and that's only been recently added, and like those decks can't really afford. And like, should those decks be able to exist? Probably. Every region should be able to have a pairing, I think. Like, maybe that's optimistic or like hopeful of me to say that, but I don't know. I think it feels really bad when you can't put two regions together because they just don't work.
Yeah, I agree with that to an extent, but the issue is, like, once you start giving regions just ways to prevent all of their weaknesses, you start getting really toxic decks that just stop losing to anything. Like, once you give Freljord Demacia, like, good card draw, like, if Freljord Demacia had, like, let's say, like, old pathways, right? And let's say they were able to activate it, no problem, right? At old pathways, they can activate it. They have this 3 mana draw. It's good. They can play 3 of it. It starts to become super toxic because it's this deck that it's so hard to beat it on board. Even like with your Flock deck, they just have so many tricks and such big units. And then like you'll say like, okay, I play more hard removal. I play Scorched Earths. I play Vengeances. I play this. And then like you can deal with their big threats, but now they just keep drawing into more threats, and it's just really hard to gas them out now.
That
and it just starts to
gives
create
me an
really
interesting-
toxic decks.
It gives me an interesting idea for like dual region locked cards. You have to be playing Demacia Freljord to play this card.
Ooh,
That's
cute.
Yeah, I mean that's like a thing in Magic, right? Like there are cards that are like so like for example, right, there's different types of cards. There's like, I don't know the exact names because I'm not like a huge Magic player, but there are some cards where it's like it costs like say a black mana and a white mana, right? So like say you would have to be playing like Shadow Isles Demacia to play this card. And then there's some cards where it's like hybrid mana cost, right? So you can think of it like Fireth, right? Where it's like you have to be in Shadow Isles or Shurima to play this card. You don't have to like be in both. So like, and it works pretty well there, and I think it leads to interesting stuff there. So it'd be interesting to have here, I think.
I want to talk about what you're saying about like adding, every type of card to a certain region. I think when you do that, you lose identity, and you also lose the fundamental balance of like how the game was structured, right? Because they planned the regions all the way from the start, and then they worked on the weaknesses and strengths, and then paper, scissors, rock, blah blah blah. You have a balanced game. So yeah, I think like that's the main reason why you don't want to give like every region some type of access to something.
So I should clarify, I don't think every region should have access to everything, but I do want to stress that I believe that every region combo should be playable in some way or another. How you go about doing that, I don't really know, but I do think that card generation being better than card draw is like, it's a draw point to this game, and I know some people in chat like P-Tash agree with myself. We've been talking about this like in my chat as we're streaming this, because I do live stream these on my Twitch channel. Shameless self-plug. Twitch.tv/MonteXristo. You can go check it out. If you want to participate, we do read chat as we're going through this big draw of this. But I think every region combo should have something like, doesn't have to be tier 1, but like at least tier 3, tier 2.5. Like
every combo does.
Do they? Like,
name one.
Tier
Galio Udyr is not a deck, Shadawx. I know you want it to be. I know you think it is, but it's not a deck.
Galio
I mean, like, you say that, but like Galio
is.
Udyr, like it does have a matchup table that is like somewhat reasonable, right? Like you literally dumpster any like deck that just wants to play the board or like dirtles and can't remove like your big threat you invest in, and like anything that can deal with your big threat you invest in, you just kind of cry about it because like they're just gonna kill that guy and then kill you eventually.
There's a playable deck in each combination. The question is like, how good is it? Is it ever going to get a chance to shine in the meta? Like, a lot of them are shit, but they are playable, and they do have, like CardGamer said, some matchup tables. But they might not be the best matchup tables.
Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
Like they do beat things. They do serve a purpose, right? And like, if you start playing in a very low power level format, or like this is something where it happens a lot more in like paper card games, just because like there's a lot of like, oh, you're hanging out with buddies and you're like, okay, let's play, and you're just like, okay, well, like this is kind of a funny deck and it has like a pretty interesting matchup against this deck, and like, yeah, they're low power level, but we can play it because it's like interesting, and like you can do that in Runeterra. It just doesn't happen as much because since it's an online card game, just like ladder and like this tournament experience is so accessible to us.
Mm-hmm. Nobody likes to have fun.
Yeah, that's true.
There's very few.
Just not here, at least. There's definitely people that like to have fun. Just not
very
us.
Few competitive players that like to have fun.
We have fun. I beat Whatamai today on ladder with an all-in Fizz deck. Like, Fizz was literally the only card in the deck, or the only unit in the deck.
Oh, did you get sent that by that viewer? I refused to play it. They were like, you should play this. I've been winning in Masters. I was like, nah, bro. Like, I love Fizz. I'm not touching this. I'm sorry.
Dude, I won. It was 100% win rate, so I don't know.
He was saying he was doing really well with it too, and I was like, nah, like, I'm not playing this, my guy. Like, it's only Fizz and 37 spells. I can't.
Yeah,
legendary
really
deck building.
About it.
Legendary deck building. Huge ups for Freljord.
It was Bandle Freljord, and we don't have to talk about it too much, but I'm going to be real. I'm going to take that deck, put Papercraft Dragon in it, and I think between Entreat and the 5-mana Freljord buff and draw unit, that deck might be real. Like, 100%. I'm not joking. It felt incredible.
I actually genuinely
so good.
Wait, but like, actually though, what the fuck is Ionia gonna do about it? You're not gonna play any units. You're not gonna play any units for Kennen, and then you're just gonna papercraft them. What are they gonna do? Stun Fizz?
Like, it's a good joke.
They need singular will.
You know what? You might be right. It might hit this meta really hard.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
When you refine it, send it to me. Like, I can't play a list that's only got 3 champions in it. Like, that's not power to that guy for winning in Masters with that list. I'm not even Masters right now. Like, I really shouldn't be having this much of
this guy literally solved the meta, and you told him no. Imagine, Monty.
You fool.
Dude, this is gonna be like the comment about how we shot down that guy's Ashy Deer deck all over again.
There's a lot of
Twitch, like shameless
chatters,
plug, you know. Jump over to twitch.tv/SantaTCG. I'll play the decks Monty won't play for some reason.
Is
Yeah,
that what we're
exactly.
doing? We're going around plugging ourselves?
and one
like,
will-
it seems the theme.
Shadawx, why don't you give us your YouTube channel while we're at it?
Yeah, twitch.tv and / Eniamor. Find me there.
Oh, sure.
Nice.
Hey, that's me. Oh, crazy shit.
Oh god.
But yeah,
Okay,
I think
Chat brings up
Oh, yeah.
Sudden, but like Sudden played decks that were like fringe, but actually had made some sense. Like I've
Yeah,
slapped
like
people with
Maokai
Sudden decks.
Asol. That
It
one
was
made sense.
Zoe. It was Zoe.
Oh no,
These
it's
decks make
both.
sense.
He played both.
Oh, did he play Asol too?
He played Asol.
Rally Yetis was like tier 2 for a while. That was a Sudden deck. And
Bro, these are decks
you know what was a
I
Sudden
don't even
deck?
know exist.
You know what was a Sudden deck that actually became somewhat meta? Timo Zed. That deck like popped up for a minute.
The thing
He's
with
just a
Sudden
lucid
is, but the thing with Sudden is he would force his decks every time. So like even when the meta wasn't good for it, he would still be playing it. So it's like once in a while you would just be like, oh hey, Yetis is like good because I know Sudden's playing it, but he plays it like 20 million times a year, you know. And he was a good deck builder, but he doesn't play anymore, so unlucky. Rip.
Yeah, Sudden was a homie. Sudden was a homie. He used to come into my chat and speak Greek to me, and I would just start speaking Greek to everybody. And Twitch chat would be like, "What are you saying?" And it's like, "Sorry, like guy talks to me in my native tongue. I gotta respond to him, you know." But to get us a little bit back on track, one thing we could talk about this week is like, what do you guys think about the power level of champions in the most recent expansions? This has been like a little bit, not so much of a hot button topic, but it's been something that I've seen commented on Twitter and like on Reddit. Champions have quote unquote flopped.
Yeah, I mean, I said this before the expansion even came out. I don't remember if I ended up saying it on here, but like the power level of the champions, I think it was pretty apparent, was like extremely low. But the power level of the set overall was extremely high. And it created this really like interesting space where we have all of these new decks, or at least all of these decks with a facelift. But we don't really have like any new like centerpiece of the deck. And if we do, it isn't something like super flashy, right? Or it's really just like something that's very good at complementing the centerpiece of a deck. Like Kindred Nasus, like the new equipment, or like Nasus decks in general, like the new equipment is like really great in there and really great at facilitating like your game plan and augmenting that, but like it doesn't truly change how the deck plays.
Like even like the one good new champion deck is like Heimer Nora, and like if they kill your Nora, you just like keep doing your thing.
Nora is
It's-
like not really a
Okay.
centerpiece in that deck whatsoever. She's
Yeah,
kind
that's
of an
what I'm saying.
accessory, same as Nora Nami, which is also
It's like,
a reasonable
If
deck.
she works, it's really good. Do you need it? No. If they kill all your Noras, you can still win with the rest of your deck.
So
Yeah, most
is
of
this
the
just
time.
is this just in reference to just the last set?
I would say the one
The
before
sets
as well.
before were fine, right?
I think
You-
the sets
The
were
one
I
with
mean, wasn't
Kaisa?
the one before?
Yeah, I was gonna
Kaisa
say
and
the one
Gwen?
with
Kaisa, because like okay, Kaisa was insane, and then Evelyn and Gwen were kind of non-existent. But after the balance patch, and they really lowered the power level of the format, like Gwen and Evelyn actually had some space to do stuff. Like Viego Evelyn
Yeah.
actually started to be pretty solid as like Red Viego 2 almost, and then Dancer really started to pop up, and go crazy.
So I'd say
I think
overall that
with-
was fine, right?
I got no
With-
issue with it, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to facilitate discussion here for our podcast. You know,
I mean,
Yeah,
I wouldn't say I have like a
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say like every time they make an expansion, it's either just like, oh, it's not either. Like literally one champ is good, and then like everything else is bad, and it feels like it's so hard pushed. Like you go back to Azir Aurelia, and then from there on, it's literally like that almost every time. Kaiser's the best example for recency bias.
I actually think that 3 expansion ago, it was Annie, Jin, Alawi, and Bard, and all of those saw play.
but
Like Jin
They
was
stopped
the worst
playing,
one,
like-
and like
weird ways, right? Like Jin Annie was like really hot for a minute, then like Ilawi Demacia was really hot for a second, but like none of these decks really stuck around. None of them really made a lasting impact on the meta. And I think that's okay, right? Like you want metas to develop naturally like this and progress. But Jin Annie isn't really a playable deck today. Illaoi's been nerfed, but Illaoi was nerfed as a consequence of Bard being too strong, not because Illaoi decks were too good.
Well, Illaoi got nerfed because Riptide Sermon and Tentacle Slam were really insane. Like, Illaoi was a reasonable card before, and like, she wasn't the best card, but she did a really powerful thing, and I think people just didn't like her, and it wasn't strong enough to justify the fact people didn't really want to play her. Because like Illaoi was a really reasonable deck before Sermon came out. And I think like while it does kind of feel like there's been one champion pushed a lot, I feel like through all of Bandle, most of the sets there's been like multiple good champions. Like Cyan and Nami were both insane, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Ari and Kennen, who were both good. Also, like Poppy came out in the first Bandle expansion, and Ziggs. And then like the third Bandle expansion was not as good, but like Gnar was very good, and like Yuumi is a very reasonable champion. Like she kind of was limited in pairings, but like she was good with what she was supposed to do.
I also think that sometimes people just don't want to experiment with stuff that doesn't get solved immediately. Like if we're going back to the previous expansion, Gwen, right?
Yep.
So Gwen's current deck, I think, is the same with the exception of Hate Spike, right? And I don't think that change makes it like tier 5 previously, right? People just didn't find the deck. It was not going to be as good as it is now, but no one found the deck during that season.
Yeah, it would have been a reasonable deck. It wouldn't have been one of the better decks in the game.
But it would have been playable at 2
for sure.
Spike.
Exactly.
Yeah, 2 mana Hate Spike. And also, I think what's more relevant is like the power level of the meta at the time was a lot higher. But like, it still would have been a reasonable deck, right?
Yeah.
And people just didn't find it because you could be playing a bunch of other stuff that was more powerful.
I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier, right? Is that a lot of competitive players don't like to have fun, right? They don't like to take chances or experiment much.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Any Shadawx and I have talked about this in the Wombat server previously. Like, we've gone on record and discussed how, like, there's not an infinite number, but there's like so many tier 2, like tier 3 decks that are playable and have some matchup tables that you could want and you could find, but nobody's willing to experiment with them because they don't want to risk their LP, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that. They just care about playing the tier 1 deck and climbing, and that's fine, but there's a lot of room for experimentation, and our player base just isn't big enough at this point in time to be finding those niche decks, those hidden decks.
Yeah,
I feel like there's kind of 2 conversations about this. I feel like there's like people aren't playing enough like kind of more niche tier 2 decks that like do exist and are powerful and are definitely overlooked. Like I think for a long time, especially on the show, I was like, everyone's sleeping on Peak, man. Like Peak slaps. Which is definitely like I would say falls into that category, but I think there's also this other category which sounds a little bit more of what you guys were talking about, which is like people want to play what they know works, and people don't want to have fun and be creative and try like some wacky ideas that have a lot of merit to them, which is where things like Dancer comes from, and things like 3G Shellfolk like you built any come from, and like a whole bunch of other decks that have popped up in the past, where it becomes like really creative and really like out of the box deck building. I know like Floppy Mudkip, who's like I work with and like prep a lot with, like definitely talks about this too, where it's like when trying to build these new decks, you have to try and look in like areas people haven't looked before, and you also have to like understand deck building, and this is just something not a lot of players can do. Like I personally can't do it, but I think it is something that a lot of people don't try as well, because you obviously have to try and do that stuff to get better at it.
Is it bad if I say that I think it's like expansions faults for like, you know, certain decks being pushed? Because I feel like most of the time it's just like archetype pushing almost every expansion, and you get to a point as like a deck builder where that's even hard to do anything. Like we were talking about the champions. The champions flop because they're pushed so heavily in that archetype that so much of that power level was like dependent on if like that archetype's good, and then you get to something like when the meta's just good cards, like Sermon. You know, Sermon's just a good card, and it's just a good card meta now, rather than
like
creativity.
Jax, all his followers went to timelines.
Exactly, yeah. And that's good too. But then Ionia came in, and Weapon Masters are like honestly one of the strongest cards in the game, but they're so exploitable by Ionia that now this is an Ionia meta. And that's only that because, well, you know, you're playing good cards.
Yeah, this was a weird expansion where the like champions fell flat, but I feel like the power level of the support cards was extremely high. Like cards like Momentous Choice is honestly kind of crazy to me that was printed. Like if Momentous Choice just read like +1 or like +1/+0 or +0/+1 increased to +2 or +0/+2 with an equip, that'd be fine. But the fact that it double casts is crazy to me. It like enables these really degenerate decks to like abuse Nami and abuse Lee Sin in these ways that we'd kind of all agreed was bad. Like I think like that on top of like Momentous Choice and Wuju style and like these like very like low deck building cost cards are very, very powerful, but it's what's defining this meta. Like I shouldn't be able to run fewer spells than I used to in a Lee Sin deck and level Lee Sin more consistently. Like that's crazy.
So I wonder.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say like I wonder how much of this is like an issue for the devs since for those who don't know, the devs do make sets a year in advance, somewhere close to there. I wonder how out of touch or how caught up in the future they are to like notice these things, like that these champs are all like average that just came out, and the rest of the set is like pretty good, and how unexpected like the things that people make can become, and how much it might like. Can we swear? How much can we like mess up the next expansion and stuff? Like for example, like did they know Kaisa was gonna be like that fucked up?
No. There's no way, right? Like
I mean, yeah.
I swear
they definitely
did not
didn't.
test Kaisa with Demacia. Like they could
That's
they
like,
had
yeah.
to have just tested Kaisa with like, oh, Build Runner has a lot of funny keys.
Yeah.
Oh, Kaisa Evelyn. Oh, this seems solid.
No, I think it's just like I think it's
That was
easy
like-
to underestimate the amount of deck building costs that something has. So you look at a card like Momentous Choice, you need to put weapons in it. So you might think like, oh, that's a high cost. You have to put a critical mass. Like, no, you can
Then
just
you
put
look
an
at
Ionian
Hook
Weapon
Master.
Master, and that was good enough.
Yep.
They're probably like, oh,
Right?
Ionia and Jax has to go together because if they want to use this, or like Kane Jax or like something, right?
Yeah.
If you
Or
want to
something
use
like
this card.
Kaisa, it's like I have to put in Silverwing Diver to make it good. It's like no, you run like
Did you-
just the really good cards,
Yeah,
and it works out.
Like they
I
don't
think
think,
that's just-
oh, I could just play this new dual region Noxus Ionia card. That's all I need.
Yeah, and it's like they do testing, but they don't have like hundreds of thousands of players
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to rush to rank
Yeah.
1 by optimizing this to the smallest point.
Yeah, and like
So-
I wonder if they knew some of these things but forgot.
Yeah.
And
That's
also,
possible.
Yeah, that's also possible
Yeah.
because, like I said, they work in advance. So I
Yeah.
also wonder though, like, so before they've said that they purposely make some cards overpowered and plan to fix it later. I wonder if like
I think that's perfectly
like,
fine.
How do we know which ones are done on purpose? You know, I mean, some of them you could probably tell, but you know,
Like,
Kaisa smile.
let's go back to Yordle Explorer. They knew Yordle Explorer was broken when it was coming out. We got a fix for that within what, a week and a half, 2 weeks. That was like that was a card where they obviously knew it was like way too strong on release, but they overlooked it. It made it past final design, whatever. I think it's okay for them to do that as long as they're prepared to fix it relatively quickly as soon as the player base is getting tired with it.
yeah. And then,
I mean, like,
so,
in the same expansion, I think we got Ezreal Kennen, which I think is reasonable to assume that they didn't know it was going to be that powerful.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And-
the other thing I was going to say, I think there's a lot of really good players on the dev team, but I don't think there's a lot of really good deck builders. And I think deck building is very much a try and go process, and it's very much an extended refinement process. And when you're playtesting these sets and you're designing these sets and you're designing future sets as well, because they're not just working on one set at a time, they don't have the time to do this refinement process and like find out this is the most broken thing in the world. They might have a general idea of, oh, this combo is going to be strong. We might want to keep an eye on it, but they don't anticipate that it's going to be quite as broken as it's going to be.
Yes, and like a good example with Yordle Explorer was, I'm fairly certain Paparo was printed with Yordle Explorer's like normal effect in mind, because Paparo sucks ass.
Yeah.
So like I'm pretty sure they were expecting the curve to be like, oh, Yordle Explorer into Paparo, and this guy's like gonna like wipe the floor with them. Now look.
Yeah.
Yordle Explorer, Paparo, 4-3 Poppy, game over.
I will say. I will say a good example that kind of highlights what you guys are talking about, where like they kind of test cards a little bit and they see it strong, but they don't really realize how problematic the card actually is. Is Ruben talked about stress testing on stream one time in relation to like TF is, where he was like, they were testing that card before it came out, and like he played in like TF is type deck, and like, you know, there was like a game or two where he like leveled the TF on like really quickly with the stress testing, and he was like, oh well, like this is really powerful, but like it probably can't really be that problematic. Like TF is this like 4-mana 2/2, like yada yada yada. Like how much does it actually happen? Like how much is my opponent not being ready? Like the meta not being ready to like just, you know, have removal for this guy. And it can become really easy to overlook, especially when like when you're playtesting. Like the questions you're asking yourself aren't how do I refine this deck and like do that. It's like, is this gameplay loop engaging? Does it capture the experience we want, right? And it can become a bit easier to overlook these things.
Yeah,
it's also really funny because if you know, Ruben Zoo was playing Tier Fizz since Rising Tides. So anyone who has like an idea of how that deck works should be Ruben Zoo. So just like overlooking stress testing is just such a funny idea.
No, but CardGamer's totally right. That's not the kind of thing they're necessarily looking for when they are playtesting these cards, right? As he said, they're looking for, is this engaging? Is this like loop? Is this feedback loop good? Is it positive for player experience? And like when you can only have so much time to run these games to test this stuff before it hits live, because a lot of it is spent designing the set, designing the themes of the set, then designing the individual cards, then testing the cards to make sure that they're not too far out of line, and then touching up the final numbers. You don't have necessarily the time, as we've previously said, to be like, hey, this is going to happen 9 out of 10 games. You're not playing that many games to come to that conclusion, right?
You're also playing against like other unoptimized playtesting decks.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to gauge the power level of your very small sample size of like whether you're gonna get your 9 cards flip TF on turn 6, or if that's just like a blue moon thing. Like,
yeah, and as much as players like probably don't like to hear it, players are the optimal and the best testing experience, right?
Yeah.
You can't truly get, you know, you can't catch everything that's overpowered, right? Like
it's unrealistic
just between
to
your
expect
team
that.
of like what 6 like testers or something, right? Like
Who knows?
like
Yeah,
for all we know, there's like
I
one
think-
guy who just loves thralls and jams it, and he's like, this deck sucks or something, you know?
I
With
think
Omen
just like
Hawk.
such a great example of like how hard it is to catch everything is like, okay, pretty much like a year ago at this point, right? Go and watch Legends of Runeterra Worlds, like play-ins, what there is of that, like qualifiers, like top 16, and then look at where the meta actually ended up 2 weeks from there, and then like at seasonals, and you'll just see like that's like some of the best players in the world, right? That's like what at the time like 248, 256 of the best players in the world, from all the different regions competing, and like these guys missed so much shit. Like they were not even close to refining Scion, had no idea about Rally Elusives really. Like they kind of were onto it, but like the builds were not anywhere near refined to where they should have been on both like Vandal Rally and Rally Elusives. Like Nami was very refined, and I know any of you actually had a big part in that. That was like one of the highest points of that. But like Darkness, people were really out of the loop on it. Vandal Tree was like in a really weird spot, and there was a lot of people playing Triple Tree. It's just like, I think it really shows like even when you have the best players really trying to figure things out, it takes a long time to like figure out everything in a game.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Santa. I was going to
Yeah,
transition,
I wanna-
so finish up.
I just want to add like one final point. Oh, bye, Annie.
He just
I wanna
DM'd me
add, like,
his internet
one-
died. He should hopefully
Oh,
be
One
back.
final point to like kind of cap that story is I think it's completely fine that things come out unbalanced, but I do think that like last champ release specifically with Kaisa meta lasted way too long. I abused it. Like I took Kaisa to my first rank 1 I've ever hit because I've never like cared enough to do that, but Kaisa was so easy and so powerful that like I had like a 75% win rate or something over like a ridiculous number of games to just like hit rank 1. And that's not like me as a player, that deck was bonkers.
Yeah, I can attest to that. And all the
Yeah.
matches were mirrors and pirates. Its worst matchup.
Yeah, so like I'm not like, this isn't like some brag. This is I want to like stress that releasing something like Kaisa is fine and like things happen that get overlooked, but I would really really love if this game could get some form of like hot fixes, I guess, like some form of pipeline to get hot fixes through. And I know it's not easy to do, and I don't even know if that's possible for this game. But like I know TFT has it, and TFT has mobile clients. Like I don't think there's any reason it shouldn't be, aside from it hasn't been set up yet.
We know for a fact it is possible, right? It happened with Draven
Yeah.
Reaver. It happened with Leona
Oh,
Reaver.
yeah,
it
you're
happened
right.
with the hotfix before Worlds, where they nerfed everything 5 days before Worlds. Like, it is possible. It's clearly possible.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have to jump through hoops to get it done or whatever, but we've seen it happen, so there is precedent for it happening and whatever.
Yeah, like that's what I'm asking for, is like a more like refined pipeline to get stuff like that done, because like that meta was terrible.
How
Like
long did
there
that
was
last?
like, sorry,
I don't
A
remember.
full
So,
month
how-
at least?
how long?
it was
A
the
month,
full
right?
patch. Yeah, it was the entire patch, because there like by the end of that patch, which was like about a full month, there was like 400 Masters players.
Yeah.
Nobody was playing
Yeah,
because
it was 3
everybody
weeks.
hated it. It's 3 weeks, yeah. Like
A
it
lot.
was brutal.
Well, it was like it's like a 5-week season, right? And
Mhm.
the patch is like 10 days before seasonal's about. So
Yeah.
it's like 3
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah,
It's gonna
like
be the
people
same
wanted
this
to play
month.
the game, but nobody actually wanted to play the
Yeah.
game. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say there is something to say about that. Like, it's hard to tell when things have reached that point sometimes because of how like tumultuous the meta could be. Obviously, I do like Kaisa did last too long, but there
Yeah.
are plenty of times that like the community at whole might be up in arms about like some week 1, week 2 deck. That like if you give it another week, it will just settle out of the meta, and like you
Mhm.
don't want to act so hastily sometimes. And like, sure, there are times with Kaisa where like maybe they're playing too reserved, and like they end up even not nerfing Kaisa that hard when it did happen. But like I think there is a tough balance to strike there.
Yeah. I think it should be an option that's in place.
Yeah.
And I think it's not a like I feel like they don't have a like go to this guidebook and follow these steps to get your hotfix out.
Mhm.
Like it always seems like something that's kind of rushed out.
I don't even think we really need hot fixes like ASAP, like Worlds patch, like when they hit Wayfinder and like Godwillow and Yorl Explorer and Poppy. I just like what I want is like, so Kaisa was really problematic when we had like that bug fix patch, you know, last time when like they hit Sharpside. It would have been really nice for them to like tag Kaisa as well, because like Kaisa proves problematic, and when it's been going on for that long, like probably something needs to go, right? I think a
That's
good
like
contrast
yeah.
point for this season is like timelines was really popping off in the first few days, and like while that certainly looked problematic and like people were up in arms about it, like the meta quickly settled around it, and like it probably will get touched and maybe even should get touched come the patch, but like
Yeah.
it isn't something where I'm like up in arms that it didn't get fixed yesterday in the bug fix patch, right? And I think like as Kennen is maybe something where like starts to push on the ground in between of like, does this need to be hotfixed? Can it wait to the balance patch? And like, it probably can't wait to the balance patch, but like, I think once you start to get stuff around that power level, it starts to become something where like it would be nice to know that like it can get touched a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Just a question: have you guys like read the other AMA like answers, or are you interested in them?
Oh shoot! Yeah.
I am.
I did.
Oh,
we
you're
don't have a
back.
lot of time.
Any.
Well, we can go as long as
Oh,
we
back.
want. Like, if we go to an hour and a half, it's an extended special episode. People are going to be happy, right?
No,
Like,
it's okay. There's not that many. It's just like, and a lot of them are not too interesting. It's just like, so for emotes, they are thinking about expanding the slots to having more than 6,
Oh,
So
and it's something
yeah.
they've been exploring.
please.
Also, they've also talked about ways to be more social and make the game less lonely, such as, you know, Hearthstone add the last player you've played feature, how that sometimes goes well. So
See, the
that's
funny thing with
that's
that
something they're
is
looking for. Yeah.
you can technically do that right now, third party.
yeah.
You can,
Yeah.
yeah. They're looking for ways like, yeah, first party, but yeah, technically you could do that already and say nice things to your opponents.
I
It
will
can happen
always
in
accept.
game. I've been added in game when I've been like slow playing games,
Me
like late
too.
in the climb, like really trying to like
Yeah.
figure everything out, and just being like,
Yeah.
last season I was climbing a bit with Kaisa, and someone like added me mid game and DM'd me and be like, "Damn, bro, why do Kaisa players always row?"
Bro.
Yeah,
I
too
had
bad
that,
Cameron's not here.
I had somebody add me mid-game while I was streaming and asked me for the free win because they were about to get into Masters. I was like, no.
Oh, that's nice.
Like, I'm on stream. Like,
That's a lot more wholesome than mine, at least.
no.
that's
I
true.
said no, and they started cussing me out.
Okay, never mind.
It went from like, I was like, no, like, I'm on stream. Like, I'm not going to do that on stream. Like, what the heck? Like, just earn the win. You're in a favored matchup anyways. Like, what the hell? And they were like, oh, you're terrible. Like, fuck you, this, that, the other. I was like, they're like, you're never going to make it as a streamer. Like, you're never going to be a
Mhm.
content creator. I was like, okay, like, sure, bud. Like, whatever.
You don't
Remove them,
miss.
continued playing, slapped into the unfavored matchup, went on my way.
This is why I always accept the friend request. I
Yeah,
think
good-
that's so
good stuff,
funny.
right?
Yeah,
quality
it's so
content.
funny.
Let's see what else. They are looking for more touch points to gather feedback from the community early enough and to help let it guide what they're doing. Like, especially for like PvP and the rotation stuff, they're open to feedback, of course.
Oh,
And they're going to be more experimental in the future and more adaptive to what's working, what isn't. Does anyone care about Path of Champions?
No.
We're gonna get Path
Kind
Champions
of.
3.
So they mentioned before co-op Path of Champions, and that's still like, I guess, on the table, but they're not working on like anything right now since they're, you know, refocusing on PvP. So
Yeah.
maybe when they go back to Path of Champions like design, they'll work on that next.
Hey, Path of
Similar to the
Champions-
United Lab thing.
Yeah. Yeah, Path of Champions is my favorite way to get a collection on my Smurfs, so kind of care.
Have you tried winning ladder? I mean,
Got 'em.
It's slower. You can go so fast in Path of Champions.
It's actually true though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, Path speeds by like quick,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you also like finish quests in there too.
Yeah, it's like easily the best way.
Mhm.
Oh, also,
Um,
by the way, just for speaking, because we talked about Path of Champions, I don't know if you guys have noticed, like, your play button or your home screen button is, like, always lit up. It's because you have a Path of Champions reward there. So go into Path of Champions and accept the reward, and it'll stop being lit up. It bothers me, so I thought I would share the knowledge.
You could
Yes.
like
one for that.
yeah, that's something you should be like pinging in this. Like that's a tweet.
Okay,
Hey,
I'll
do
make
your
that
dailies. Do your
So the
dailies,
question
get
is-
them cleared.
Do you have to get the rewards one by one?
I don't know.
I think so. Yeah, it
Because
takes
then
forever.
it's not worth it.
No, it's worth it. I hate the flashing.
You just have to accept it, like, in the there's, like, a screen, and it's like, here's your rewards, and you just press through it, and it's like,
You know,
whatever.
you know what the best like time was? Remember when LOR had that one sound bug?
Yeah.
With, like, shine, like the shining when like prismatics were out and
you
all that.
muted it, and it would still go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it was loud as hell. And if you like alt tabbed your window and left it for a long time and you came back, it was like boom, all at once in your ear.
I wish we
That was
still had
weird.
that, and I wish we still had Ken and Mark constantly buzzing.
Marcus.
That would be
Oh,
great.
Yeah,
no.
Ken and Mark was cool.
And like maximum overwhelm bug where your hand disappears. I want all of it.
Oh.
I
You
love
should just
it.
make it a game mode, you know?
Yeah,
was the
right?
worst.
That should be legacy format. Actually,
That
It's
should just
all
be
of
a-
those back.
just
in.
make that like a
Fuck
new
3/3
champ ability.
Fiora.
Yeah, just make it a new champ, right? That can be like their level up, you know? When you level me up, your opponent's hand gets like
Bring
pushed
back-
back every hit.
All the bugs.
Prismatics, they said they're talking about doing something more.
That'd be
with them.
cool.
Okay.
Because someone mentioned that they're kind of lackluster at the moment.
A lot of people have
Yeah.
talked about wanting animations on cards and like
Yeah.
stuff like that, and I do think that's a good way to expand their monetization strategy. I do think that's a good way to expand like free cosmetic stuff, whatever they want to do. I think that's a great avenue to explore.
Yeah, it's something they're want to explore. It's just finding the matter of, I guess, scope to do it.
Mhm. Is there anything else major that was mentioned in the AMA before I transition us?
Major? Do you like Path of Champions?
Yeah. Next. Okay, so
Sorry, there actually was
Okay.
the limited pool or limited game mode. Like, remember Expeditions?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Expeditions. But
Yeah.
So
Continue.
someone asked about that in the future, and it says now that we've got a larger card pool, it's something worth experimenting with things like changing the rule set, like for example, custom matches with like, custom rules and stuff. I think we talked about that
yeah,
recently somewhere.
we've
I don't
we've
know
talked
where,
about
but
it in the past.
Yeah,
we all
and
want
potentially
draft.
in the future, even going so far as trying out wilder game modes, like removing region locks or even something like 4 players.
So
So that's something they might play around with.
very cool. For those of you that don't know, there is currently a draft tool out there. It was produced by a gentleman named Grim. I know some of you guys in here have had a chance to play around with it already. I haven't quite yet. I'm really excited to. I would like to. I've dropped the link in my chat, and I'm sure we can try and get it in the YouTube description for people as well. There are alternatives to that, but of course we would like first-party support for that. I personally was always a fan of Expeditions in Hearthstone, and I felt like Expeditions in Arena in Hearthstone and Expeditions in Legend of Runeterra were a little bit lackluster comparatively. I don't know why, but there was just something missing.
It's the
I've heard,
bucket drafting, man.
but I've heard
It
people
is,
that were
yeah.
really into Expeditions really liked the bucket draft because they said that you could manipulate it in certain ways to get your card pools the way that you really wanted and make these really refined, really good decks. Like,
Yeah,
Sort
you
of
could. I
cheating, huh?
hated that. It made it
Yeah.
terrible.
I don't
That-
know.
That was cringe.
Yeah, that sounds like cheating to me.
I just
Wanna build
did not
interesting
like
decks.
Expeditions. They were not fun.
Yeah.
So
Also, coincidentally,
I played-
Grim was the one who asked that question.
Oh, shout outs
Yeah.
to Grim.
So I played Expeditions when I was starting, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was more fun than ranked because I couldn't build a full competitive deck.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I wasn't so involved in the scene. But it definitely felt a little hit or miss because of how the buckets work. You either ended up like a really good deck, or a deck that you knew could go 1 or 2 wins, but you'd rather just quit the run then and start a new run.
It also didn't help that there was no advantage rewards for Expeditions. Like, it was the same, just shards. Like, there was
Yeah,
no
going step-
go 12 wins and get your 7 free packs
Yeah,
and
well-
all your gold and your legendary and whatever, right? Like,
It's there was a small bonus in that once you went 7 wins, you could do it indefinitely. You got the full refund. The annoying part was there's no incentive if you went 7 wins to play the second run at all.
Mhm.
Mhm.
If you go 7-7, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you get the same.
all right. Is
I think
that covers the AMA?
It's-
there's,
Thank you.
Actually, this one might interest you.
Monty
Oh,
just
tease
wants
us
to
about
have
official
fun.
comms.
He's looking
Okay,
to get done with it.
I'm all here for that.
So they want ways to give feedback and to be heard, to be clear to all players, and for our dev team to be aware and actively incorporating that feedback into the process. So I guess they're trying to find better messaging and client, more consistent and in-depth where possible. But so far, it's not much, really. It seems like at the moment, they're still sticking to the informal dev to community comms, and the official comms are just formal, distant, and less informative. So I guess more I want to say more marketing-ish and more general knowledge stuff. And if you want detailed stuff, the dev to community responses is what you're going to have to look for now. But it looks like they want to do something like in client, like better messaging things.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Can we fix the friends list, please? I don't want my client to lag the fuck out every time I open it. I just bought a brand new PC. Like, my PC is top of the line, and it still lags the fuck out. So, I don't know. It's not a hardware issue.
When I was speccing you on my phone during the Duos thing, it took so long. I would just keep the friends list open and watch the grayed out version of the game because it took too long to open it back and forth every time I wanted to message you.
It's terrible.
So, to move us into our next talking point, this is something that I did want to touch on because we have Eniamor here, who has been a notable ladder grinder. Like, I've seen this man go from 0 to, like, top of the ladder within a week towards the end of the season. Codeman Jack asked in the Mastering Runeterra server, Ask the Pros section, which is something you can all get access to if you sub to the Mastering Runeterra website or whatever you like, or the Patreon. I think we're moving away from that, so go to the website, sub there. But he goes, I'm curious, how do you all approach climbing in Masters, specifically when trying for 7-2 seeding? Do you prep, and if so, how much? Do you have an LP goal for a session, or do you just play until you start losing? If the ideal deck into the current meta or new hot deck is unfamiliar, do you prepare before taking it on ladder, and if so, how? Anything else relevant would also be appreciated. So this is something we've touched on in the podcast before, but we've never had a ladder climbing specialist. Not that we're all not capable. I mean, I'm not capable, but the rest of you are. But Annie, do you want to start us off? What's your process for going through when you make these heroic climbs?
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'll start it off from like the start point of like what deck I'm going to play. Because like I'm a person who like all the time I'll try and deck build. I've kind of changed my philosophy like a bit, but most of the time I'm just trying to make good decks. But when I'm like really trying to climb, I'll try and pinpoint the best ladder deck. It's not necessarily the best deck in the game, but it's the best deck that's the most versatile into what I'm going to see. And usually that's kind of hard to describe, but you can have an idea of what you're going to see either by like time zone or just the basis of the meta. And you can usually find like decks like this all the time. Great example was Plunder. That was after the Draven format, and then Draven was also the perfect example for the best ladder deck. There was other ones like Scion, Kaiser last season, even though I couldn't climb with that. You want to find those decks, and then you want to set goals. And if you can do stuff like that, you relatively can, climb to a 7-2. You don't need to be excellent at the game. I don't think I'm excellent. Like, I'll be honest, I think I'm mid, and people might disagree. But I really think, like, if you're consistent enough, you can hit 1,000 LP very, very easily. So, yeah. I don't know if you guys want me to keep talking or expand on that, or if you guys have some questions. I can keep going.
Don't stop.
I can give you
my
my routine. This is like a YouTube gym, ad where I'm telling you about like how to subscribe to my 5 facts of success.
How much is your course?
It's pretty cheap. It's $5, but there's like a small imprint of like per minute. But like I try and make that look like per month, and then I get the big bucks. But anyway,
can I get a 15% discount
from Temple Store? Sure.
Yeah.
But so that's like the main start point, and then you want to have like relatively reliant and respectable goals that you're gonna follow, and these goals can also be like pre-tilting measures that you don't want to fall off. And a main reason in what I do or like how I do it is the first time I'll play and find a good deck, I'll try and get 200 LP, and then I'll cap that down to 100. And I won't also base that off like a consistent amount of like I have to get 100. If I get like 70 and I say, oh, that's pretty good, I'm like chilling, I'm gonna stop and then just call it a day. I also play almost exactly every specific. I play on a specific time almost every day if I'm trying to climb, because one, that helps with the meta, and two, I'm not gonna try and be burnt out on other times of like playing, and it keeps me more fresh. So you kind of like set a certain like what's the word? You're trying to like set a specific environment where you're not gonna fall. So this consistency can keep being reliable, because that's all it is. It's just consistency, and it sounds a bit horrible, but that's how you kind of climb.
Yeah, we're building good ladder habits, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Another thing is like, if you lose once or twice when you're like doing this climb of only like 80 LP, so like I don't know, I'm 300, I want to get 380. Just take a break. Like honestly, just be like, yo, I'm gonna take a 10-minute break. If I lose again, I'm gonna call it quits. But if I go like 3-0, I'm gonna say, hey, that's good. You know, I'm a bit tilted. I don't want to play anymore. I don't need to force myself. You know, there's like 10 more days in the season. I don't need to hit 500. So that's kind of like where my headspace is at all the time, and it's like a good way I try and like keep to that goal as well that a lot of people struggle with.
That's some great insight. Gentlemen, do any of the rest of you, because you guys have all hit the top of the ladder. Obviously, it's been a minute since I've done it. I haven't done it since TF Fizz season, and I was definitely riding off the coattails of that deck. So I don't have a whole lot of insight here. I'm struggling myself this season, so any advice I can get from you guys is helping me as well.
I mean,
go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I was gonna say mostly like to like boil down what Andy pretty much said. It's quality over quantity. Because like one of the biggest issues I used to have when I hit my 7-2 seeding at the beginning of this year, that was a brutal climb for me. And it's because I just kind of jammed games. Like I just played a lot. And like I managed to hit my seeding goal, but it was like really exhausting. Like it wasn't a good way to climb.
It wasn't clean.
Yeah, it wasn't clean. It was really messy. It was like a 60 like 8% win rate or like something like that. You know, like you're barely climbing and it's just jamming so many games.
And just for our listeners, you need over a 66% win rate or better to actively climb in Masters. That's just the way it works out. So Santa's saying it was only a 68% win rate, but that's only 2 points above the minimum. Like,
yeah,
he's not being facetious or anything like that here. That is only like, it's just the way it works when you hit Masters.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, I didn't want to come off like I'm gloating.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I did that, like that was really messy. It was really grindy and it was really exhausting. As we're like when I played the Kaisa meta and I hit rank 1, like that wasn't like it was using Kaisa, so like my win rate was definitely inflated, but I wasn't playing like 20 games a day trying to hit 7-2. I was playing like 5 games a day, or like if I'm having a really good day, like maybe I play some more or something like that. But a really easy a really easy hole to fall into is just jamming games, and you will burn out so fast, and you do need to maintain like a 65% win rate at least, and that's high. Like that's not easy. So keeping like a good headspace is definitely important.
Yeah. That's definitely one of my biggest things, is to like make sure you're in the right mindset when you're playing. I also think and he talked about it a lot, but deck selection is really important, and with deck selection I think it's also important to understand your limits as a player and what you're capable of as a player, and to use that to your advantage. If you're very good at one deck, or you have a hard time of learning a lot of decks, you should try and figure out the deck that you're the best at that suits the meta, and you should really try and stick to that and really spam it. But there are some other players who, you know, they have a handful of decks they have, or like I tend to play most decks, so I'm pretty comfortable swapping around between a handful of different decks depending on what I'm seeing. And that's like a benefit to me. But if you're a player who your deck this season is Pirates, and like you're playing ladder and you're just running into like a bunch of Thresh Nasus and like random SI piles and Echo Zillion and other tricky matchups, like it doesn't make sense for you to try and beat them. Just, you know, it's just not your time to play right now. Cut your losses and come back later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one tricking a deck is a very valid strategy.
I think
it's
just...
both.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Let me go real quick.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, like, I think you should just really play to your strengths. Like, some people are really good at one tricks, but, like, some people, it's just your strength is to play everything right. Like, I think it's really important to stick to what you have. It's just like one tricking works better for most people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, both of my 7-2 finishes for like both of my 7-2 top cuts were one tricking Pantheon and one tricking Kaisa.
Yeah.
Like I would play like a handful of decks to like counter queue certain people and stuff, but like mostly it was one deck.
That's actually something I want to bring up. Stick to one deck, okay? If you if you get a weird pocket meter of someone just hating Pantheon and you're playing Pantheon, just stop. Like, don't change the deck. Like, don't be like, okay, I'm going to cancel that, because that's when you tilt, and you don't want to really tilt. Otherwise, then you're going to go back and back and back, and then it leads to a spiral, and then unhealthy habits, yada yada. So yeah.
So one tricking is always something that I've been a big advocate of, because I believe when you know your deck in and out, especially if it's like slightly off meta, like something like Thresh Gnosis right now, which is kind of around but not really, you can just straight up skill gap players that don't understand how to play the matchup different, right? So that's a big part of it. And also, knowing one deck lets you take your focus off of your deck and put it onto your opponent's plays and your opponent's hand reads, and like trying to make hand reads and watching what they're doing and trying to understand how to play the game on a more fundamental level, better than trying to nitpick this, that, the other. That said, I know players who feel that, like Ali Caesar, who's an EMA player on Kova, he has made multiple top cuts, and he's talked to me about how he feels when he sticks to one deck, he starts autopiloting, and he needs to change his deck up every 2-3 games because it helps him turn on and like keep his focus. Obviously, that's not going to work for everyone, and that comes back to what CardGamer says: identify what works for you and stick to that play to your strengths. So yeah, that's kind of my spiel. Phansora, you've been a little bit of a ladder grinder yourself lately. Do you have anything to add to this combo?
You say that? I only grinded last season under extremely dubious circumstances, because that was Kaisa. Santa wasn't even playing at that point.
That's lately.
I was playing against like diamond people up at like 500 masters. It was a weird few days before. So I actually don't think that was super informative. I was just like using Kaisa. Kaisa was a very strong deck, and I ended up knowing it better than a lot of my opponents who were playing Kaisa or like Pirates. But like the season before was my previous highest at like 400 or something. I got there without too much trouble, and then I just kind of swapped off every 5 decks or so, and just slowly lost everything all the way down to 0. And like, I don't usually tilt, but like, I was watching like it'll go down 50 and then another 50 or something, and just like mild tilting, and I was switching decks to like chase losses basically. Like, I would lose to a deck, and then a few games later I'll lose to another of that deck. I'm like, okay, I gotta switch a deck, so I'm going to counter queue those decks, and I don't face those decks anymore. And like that, keep doing that, and you're just gonna lose everything. Yeah. It's not healthy.
Okay, let me. I want to add a stipulation to like how I was saying, like swapping around decks. What I would tend to do is, one, I pay attention to my match history and I try and see if there's a trend in stuff I'm facing. And the other thing I tend to do, not only to like warm myself up in a sense, but to also kind of get a little bit of familiar with what I'm gonna be seeing on ladder, is if there's a streamer who's like on the server I'm playing on, like I'll just open their stream. I'll just like watch their games for a few times. I'll see what they run up into, and like when they make plays, you know, I'll just like, would I have made that play? How would I have played differently? And essentially just like try and turn my brain on for Runeterra, and also just like kind of figure out what pocket meta I'm about to throw myself into.
Yeah,
so I was like doing the bad version of that, where like I was so I was like trying to also learn new decks, and like I had a good amount of LP to lose. Like I was in a position that I could have made a push for 7-2 Sign that season. But I was like switching off to decks I didn't know too well, and then like playing them suboptimally, and then switching off to a new deck that I didn't know too well. And that's like not a good idea. I think like one trick is great, but it's not necessary. But switching too often to also try to chase your losses is just like a recipe for disaster.
I'm pretty biased, but I think one tricking is definitely the way to go. Especially with what Monty said, is like, you beat your bad matchups just if you can like do well with that. A lot of the times, like how I look at it and how I'm playing is like I'm trying to get a certain amount of wins, and if I run into like 2 of the worst matchups that only happen once in a while and I win those, I'm counting that as a good day. But I'm also going to hop off early, so it accelerates my climb as a one tricking like person on ladder while only needing to play 5 games, while also understanding that I have to stop because like I also know that's a bad matchup, right? And I only can skill diff for like so long.
I also just want to we kind of all missed this point. Play a deck you like.
Yeah.
If you like literally the worst thing you could possibly do, like I am someone who does not like playing aggro. If someone came to me and was like, hey, what's like the best deck to climb with right now? The answer is pirates. But I don't like playing pirates, so I'm not going to climb. Like, I'm not going to play well with pirates because it's a deck I don't like. So, like, play a deck you like. If you don't like it, you're not going to climb. You're not going to play well. You're not going to have fun. Like, it is a game at the end of the day. Like, number go up is really nice, but not if you're just kind of, like, burning time and not enjoying yourself.
Funny you should mention that, because I did not like Kaisa when I started playing it. But like 100 games
Kaisa.
deep, you really develop a good like Stockholm syndrome for the deck, and like it starts being fun again. And
He's
so
right, though.
the last like
right.
30-40 games of the climb, it was a really fun deck to play.
Sometimes
But
you do kind
I
of
hated
need to
it
force
for like
yourself.
50 games.
To be
that
fair,
was
that
it.
roughly 50 games is like the average learning curve for a deck, in my opinion.
50.
40 to 50
Like
games.
50 to 100.
40 to 50
like-
is like where you start to find your footing for the deck. So like you're gonna be a little bit miserable when you're floundering.
No. I wasn't miserable because I was losing. I was miserable because I was winning, and it felt too unfair.
That's Kaisa syndrome. That's Kaisa syndrome. I feel you on that one. I have the
So,
same
like-
experience.
I very much agree with Santa. It's just really funny that the best I've ever done was in a deck I hated for the first half of climbing with it.
I always liked Kaisa. I still like Kaisa. I think it's a really fun and interesting deck.
I do think that like when by
Current
the end of
Kaisa.
it, all I was facing was mirrors and pirate counter matchups. It was really fun to navigate
Super
those
fun.
because like you had to play those very carefully.
Yeah.
And like that's what made the deck fun. When the deck was just like all brain off, if I play any of these 100 different ways, it doesn't matter how bad the bad ways are, they're still much better than what every other deck was doing. But when you're playing against the counter matchups and stuff, that was really interesting.
All right. I think everybody except
Yeah.
Shadawx has kind of said their piece. Shadawx, you like myself are a bottom of the ladder grinder, but
By choice.
you're there willingly because you're just having fun with the game. That's your main priority.
Whoa,
If
how'd you
you-
know?
Wait, I thought we weren't supposed to have fun here.
No, it's an anti-fun stream. Only Shadawx and I are allowed. That's
Yeah.
why we're down there.
What?
Oh.
But
I'm just bad.
but I
That's
just-
okay.
But I just said.
It's okay.
It's pretty much like what everyone else said, though. Just find a deck you like, preferably a good one, and just jam games thoughtfully, not mindlessly. Take breaks if you need to. If you're someone who gets tilted easily, take a break after each loss. Take a break after every 3 games or something. Or you could be like a Drizzoth. Drizzoth plays what, like 5 games a day?
I think so.
And
I don't know
that's
if
it.
he's still sticking
Win
with
or
that,
loss.
but-
Yeah, win or loss, he only
just
plays like a
occasionally
bit.
adds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like only when he like streams or on the weekends or something when he has time.
Yeah.
But that's it. Like just take your time, I think is the key thing. Like just don't stress it. It's whatever.
So one thing I do think I'm good at is climbing in the early season. I think normally I'm at Masters pretty quickly comparatively to a lot of people. And I think a lot of that does come down to one-tricking a deck, and it does come down to jamming just a disgusting number of games in the early season. But where I was going with that is that, yes, you definitely do have to enjoy what you're playing, right? If you hate it, you're not going to be engaged in the game. You're not going to be focused, just like everybody else has said. And the other thing that I was going to say with that is I lost it. So remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back next week with another Mastering Runeterra Squadcast. Bye!